Empires are not born from nowhere. They are built stone by stone, decision by decision, blood by blood, by men and women whose names history has sometimes remembered and sometimes buried. This is a series about one of the greatest empires the ancient world ever produced, the Mauryan Empire. Over the coming episodes, we will trace its rise, its glory, its contradictions, and its collapse. And we begin not with the emperor. We begin with the man who made the emperor possible. History remembers kings. It celebrates warriors. It immortalizes poets. But every now and then, behind the curtain of power, stands a man who writes history itself, without ever sitting on the throne. He was a scholar who became a spymaster, a teacher who built an empire, a man who poisoned enemies, dismantled dynasties, and wrote a blueprint for power so ruthless it still unsettles people today. His name was Chanakya, and this is his story. The year is approximately 370 BCE. The Indian subcontinent is a fractured patchwork of kingdoms, all jostling for dominance. To the north, the Nanda dynasty rules Magadha, the most powerful kingdom on the subcontinent. Their capital, Pataliputra, is a city of unimaginable wealth and a standing army of hundreds of thousands. The Nandas were powerful, but they were not loved. They taxed the people into poverty. And their king, Dhana Nanda, was known for spectacular arrogance and casual cruelty. And then there was Alexander the Great, sweeping through Persia, marching toward India's northwestern frontier. The subcontinent was about to be squeezed from both sides. It was into this world, broken, dangerous, and ripe for transformation, that a young Brahmin scholar emerged from the ancient university of Takshashila. His birth name was Vishnugupta. The world would come to know him as Chanakya, and he was, by every account, extraordinarily brilliant and extraordinarily angry. Every great story of transformation begins with a wound. For Chanakya, that wound came in the court of Dhana Nanda. Chanakya traveled to the Nanda capital seeking an audience with the king, perhaps with a proposal to unify Indian kingdoms against the Western threat. But Dhana Nanda was not a man who respected scholars. He saw before him an ugly, disheveled Brahmin. Accounts describe Chanakya as having broken teeth and uncomely features, and had him thrown out of court, humiliated, publicly. It was for Dhana Nanda a forgettable afternoon. For Chanakya, it was the moment that defined his life. He vowed he would not tie back his hair until he had brought down the Nanda Empire. He was not a man who made empty promises. To destroy an empire, Chanakya needed a king, not a born king. Those were complicit, cowardly, or compromised. He needed someone he could mold, someone with fire in his veins and no throne to lose. He found him in a young man named Chandragupta Maurya, of obscure origins, possibly low birth, but possessing raw courage and a natural authority that Chanakya recognized immediately. He took Chandragupta under his wing and spent years pouring everything into him: military strategy, political philosophy, the arts of statecraft, diplomacy, and subterfuge. He turned him into both a warrior and a ruler. It was the most consequential teacher-student relationship in Indian history. And when the training was done, the real campaign began. Chanakya's genius was not just in tactics. It was in sequencing. You do not attack the strongest point first. You build from the edges inward. Their first direct assault on the Nanda Empire failed. Chanakya regrouped, studied, revised. Then he moved again, this time through the northwest, where Alexander's death in 323 BCE had left a vacuum of power. Chandragupta swept through those territories, gathering alliances and building an army that grew as it marched east. Then came the war for Magadha itself. And here is where we must stop celebrating and start looking clearly. Because the methods Chanakya used to bring down the Nandas were not noble, they were cold, calculated, and often deeply troubling. Chanakya ran one of the ancient world's most sophisticated espionage networks. He embedded spies, men and women, in every layer of Nanda society: merchants, monks, servants, even courtesans, all feeding information back to him, all instruments of his strategy. He used poison as a political tool. The Arthashastra, his own text, contains detailed instructions on how to eliminate enemies through slow-acting poisons slipped into food and drink. Scholars believe this was not merely theoretical. There are accounts suggesting that Chanakya personally arranged the poisoning of Nanda loyalists to clear the path for Chandragupta. He also, according to some traditions, arranged the killing of the Nanda royal family after the conquest, including women and children, to prevent any future claimant from raising a rebellion. No loose ends, no mercy. There is another story, darker still. It is said that Chanakya, in his obsessive campaign to protect Chandragupta, had been feeding the emperor small doses of poison from childhood to build an immunity. One night, Chandragupta unknowingly shared his food with his pregnant queen, Durdara. She had no such immunity. She died. The child was saved by emergency surgery. That child was Bindusara, who would go on to rule the empire. But the queen was gone, a life erased by a plan she never knew she was part of. Whether this story is history or legend, it reveals something true about how Chanakya operated, with a ruthlessness so total that even those closest to the emperor were not safe from its consequences. When Pataliputra finally fell, it fell not just to an army, it fell to years of invisible work. Poisonings, betrayals, manufactured crises, and cultivated traitors. Dhana Nanda was defeated. The Maurya Empire was born. To understand how Chanakya thought, you must read his book, The Arthashastra, a manual covering statecraft, economics, military strategy, law, diplomacy, espionage and governance. One of the most extraordinary and unsettling documents of the ancient world. Chanakya served as prime minister under Chandragupta, and the relationship, for all its success, was not without darkness. Chanakya controlled information. He decided what the emperor knew and what he didn't. He surrounded Chandragupta with his own network of agents, watching not just enemies of the state, but watching the emperor himself. Some historians describe it less as loyalty and more as management. Chandragupta was powerful, but Chanakya held the strings. There's a story that near the end of Chanakya's time at court, a rival minister, Subandhu, poisoned Chandragupta's son, Bindusara, against his grandfather's advisor, claiming Chanakya had caused his mother's death. Bindusara confronted Chanakya. Chanakya, by most accounts, did not deny it. He simply retired, withdrawing from court without defense, without apology. He had spent his life doing what he believed was necessary. He had no interest in defending it to those who hadn't made the same choices.
2,000 years later, his name is still read. His strategies are still studied. In military academies, in business schools, in the corridors of governments that would never admit it. That is not merely legacy. That is a reckoning. With a man who looked at power, clear-eyed, unafraid, and utterly without illusion, and left behind a portrait of it so honest, we are still not sure whether to admire it or be afraid of it. Perhaps both. Perhaps that was always the point.